Well, it gives me great pleasure now to give a deeper glimpse on today's agenda. Let's put our hands together to welcome the editor-in-chief and founder of DealStreetAsia, Joji Thomas Philip, for the welcome note. Joji, please.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. Good morning. How are you all feeling? Good? Yes. Welcome to DealStreetAsia's 4th Indonesia PVC Summit. I'm Joji Philip, founder and editor at DealStreetAsia. This is the region and Indonesia's first major conference in 2023, which has a bunch of PVC investors, startup founders, and policymakers. And I can't tell you how excited the DealStreetAsia team and I are to be here with you today. And that's reflected in our theme too. Indonesia is happening. And our theme for the summit today, this year, is Indonesia, an unlikely outlier in a turbulent world. So this was let me get the, yeah. So this was a picture of our summit in 2020. Little did we know that it'll be 3 full years before we could come and do an offline event like in Jakarta. And it's been 3 years. And in 3 years, DealStreetAsia has changed too. I want to just take a minute or two to introduce ourselves to those of you who don't know us. Some of you know us for our daily news, breaking news and analysis. All of you know us for our summit, that's why you're here. A few of you are our data subscribers. So let me just take a minute to just explain what we do at DealStreetAsia. So this is the DealStreetAsia ecosystem. We have 3 lines of businesses. We are a subscription-based digital media and data company, and our aim is to produce journalism and analytics worth paying for. Now that's our core business. We also have a data arm. The DealStreetAsia database, also called DataVantage, helps you identify the right companies to invest in across markets and sectors. You can find out the exact shareholding of companies, their funding data. You can look at the price per share. You can look at their financials. So if you're an investor or a founder tracking competitors, our database is a must-have solution for you. Our data subscribers also get 3 to 4 data-heavy research reports a month. Our second line of business is events. While our focus is on editorial, we still do 2 events a year. Our flagship event every September in Singapore, and we do our annual Indonesia Summit in January in Jakarta. Our non-editorial business, which we launched over the last 2 years, we work with our clients to produce commission research, partner content, and also work with them on bespoke solutions. So let me just take a minute to show you 2 recent research reports that we have done. The first is a report that we launched end of December, beginning of January. It was done by our data team, and this is on the state of climate tech companies in Southeast Asia. The key takeaway from this report is that climate tech companies in Southeast Asia in 2022, they raised over $1.1 billion in total in just the first 11 months. So the report will give you like a list of all the climate tech companies, the amounts that they've raised, who are the investors, and we also look at some of the other sectors, including renewable energy, agri, low carbon mobility, and more. You can scan the QR code and get a copy of this report for free. Do check it out. And this is also a very important topic. We have an entire panel on ESG and sustainability later today. Next is an example of a commission research that we've done, DealStreetAsia did with Regal Capital. This research report looks at the EV space in 2 of Asia's most important markets, Indonesia and India. And it's important because if you look at Indonesia, the Indonesian government has set a target of 2.2 million EV cars by 2030. And they've also set a target of about 13 million two-wheelers in Indonesia by 2030. In India, the number is much higher. It's about 80 million. Again, we have a standalone panel on the EV scene in Indonesia later today, so make sure you don't miss that. This report too is free. You can just scan the QR code and download it and check it out. At the start, I mentioned about our data offerings. We have a DSA booth out. My colleagues and our data team, they're out, they'll show you the product and the features. They'll answer your questions. If you're interested in picking up a subscription, be it our news and data offerings, talk to them. We have a one-day offer today, 50% off on all our offerings. Most of you are already subscribers, but those who are not, do check out our booth. Thank you so much for your support. Let me come back to the theme of the summit. Like I mentioned earlier, our summit theme is why Indonesia matters. And I just want to list a couple of points. Anecdotal, just start with an anecdotal example. A decade ago, exactly 10 years ago, Morgan Stanley had come up with a report in 2013 which labeled Indonesia as one of the fragile 5 economies. Now, these were a bunch of emerging markets which were said to be adversely impacted by rising interest rates in the US. Interest rates in the US continue to go up, and this time around, it has had no impact on Indonesia. And if you look at the last 10 years, with the exception of China and India, Indonesia is the fastest growing trillion-dollar plus economy in the world over the last 10 years. I just wanted to look at a few numbers which came out last week, again from Indonesia. If you look at Indonesia's GDP 2022, the fiscal deficit just under 30 billion, which was equivalent to 2.3% of the country's GDP. And this was far lower than the government target of 4.4%. The fiscal deficit, the government target would be about 4.4% of the GDP. Revenue last year for Indonesia went up over 30% when the government was targeting a 16% increase. Expenditure was below target. So what this implies is Southeast Asia's largest economy grew over 5.2% in 2022. And it is set to grow and against just 3.7% in 2021. Again, just let me use an anecdotal example. In an interview about a decade ago, the Lippo Group current CEO, John Riady, he had mentioned about the Indonesian startups being in 2013-14, the combined valuation of all startups in Indonesia being about 60 million. Today, the minimum value of Indonesian startups is 60 billion. So that's how much Indonesia has come in the last 10 years. And if you look at Indonesia's digital services, there are 100 million people who spent about $80 billion last year in 2022 consuming digital services. And the Google Bain Temasek report estimates this to rise to 130 billion by 2025. Indonesian VC firms, they've raised record vehicles in the last 1 year. Just look at East Ventures, Alpha JWC, AC Ventures, Northstar's first VC fund. Just between these 4 vehicles, they've raised about $1.4 billion in just the last 12 to 18 months. And obviously, yes, when the global EV scene, Indonesia is important because of its nickel reserves. It is, that makes it a key player in the EV supply chains globally. I want to spend a couple of minutes on 5 trends that our reporters have been tracking from an editorial perspective. The first trend is that when it comes to the dry powder that Southeast Asian and Indonesian VCs have, the dry powder is about $5 billion. In 2020 and 2021, when I was, our events were virtual, but one of the key trend that I spoke about was how deal making in Southeast Asia was led by the likes of Tiger, SoftBank, DST Global, A16C, Insight Partners, Hero Sophia, a bunch of other firms. Now, these firms were setting the price, the valuation for the growth rounds for all the major companies in Southeast Asia. But with most of the global funds pulling back, regional and Indonesian-specific VCs are back in play. Many of them were unable to get into deals earlier, but now it's shifted in terms of it's the balance of power has shifted. The scales have tipped in investors' favor in Southeast Asia. Let me just give you a numbers. I don't have the full 2022 numbers, but just one set of numbers to put it in perspective. Last year, in 2022 alone, in just the first 6 months, Southeast Asian VCs hit the total amount in terms of the final close of their vehicles was over $3 billion. In 2021, the amount was about 24 funds hit the final close. They raised about $2.5 billion. The record was in 2019 when 29 funds hit the final close and they raised $3.3 billion. So 2022 numbers will be much higher than the record that we had in 2019. We should be able to give you the full year numbers very soon. So 2023, 10.1, Southeast Asian VCs will set the price most of the equity deals that we will see in this region. The trend number 2 that we are tracking is going to be the great valuation reset that's going to be happening across Southeast Asia and Indonesia in 2023. So far, what has happened is we've seen the valuation reset in some of the other countries, but it has not happened. It has not happened in Indonesia yet. So that will, that is definitely set to happen in 2023. So 2023 is going to be the year of flat rounds. It's going to be the year of down rounds, and we're going to see several startups across Southeast Asia, Asia fail, especially those who don't have a product market fit. Trend number 3, yes. So what happens when global investors pull back and when there are significant valuation corrections? The most obvious thing is that the Series C, D gap that we have in Southeast Asia will widen. When I talk about Series C and D, I'm referring to the 20 to 100 million check sizes. Now, Asia Partners, one of the private equity firms, they did a study, and the study showed that in the last 4 years, there were 750 Series A and B deals in Southeast Asia, which means that all of these firms, or most of them, at some point will have to look at Series C and D. Then they compared these numbers with China, and they estimated that in 2022, the Series C and D gap in Southeast Asia was $1 billion. And half of that, $500 million, was in Indonesia alone. So this is going to slow down the unicorn birth in Southeast Asia even further. So again, if you look at the unicorns that have happened in Southeast Asia over the last decade, in 2021, Southeast Asia produced 24 unicorns. Now this was higher than all the unicorns put together in the previous decade, in the last 10 years. But when it comes to 2022, there were just 8 unicorns that happened in Southeast Asia. 3 of those 8 unicorns were from Indonesia, which is Dana, Credivo, and Akalaku. Trend number 4 that we're tracking. All of now, we're talking about the VC funds. Now coming to the PE space. 2023 is going to be a long, hard slog for Southeast Asian-focused PE funds. Again, let me give you a data point. In 2021, Southeast Asian-focused PE firms, in terms of final closes, it was over $3 billion. But in 2022, it was barely $500 million in terms of final closes by local PE firms in Southeast Asia. But it's not all doom and gloom. As of September 2022, there are about 43 Southeast Asia-focused PE firms in the market, open funds. And if you look at the targeted amounts that they're trying to raise, it's about 11 billion combined. There are also 43 global funds with Southeast Asia allocation. And if you look at all those global funds, they are raising a combined $83 billion. Some of that definitely will come to Southeast Asia. The last trend that we're tracking, and something that we talk about all the time, is the layoffs and the talent, the future of Southeast Asia. I want to focus on 3 things here. One, obviously the layoff. Industry estimates is like anywhere between 17 to 20,000 tech employees have lost their jobs in Southeast Asia in the last 12 months. The second thing that I want to touch upon is Indonesia's the new rules that Indonesia passed, the emergency regulation to replace its jobs law. Now, many of the other Southeast Asian countries are looking at it, and we expect to see similar laws come up in rest of Southeast Asia. But there's one important thing that I want to spend a little more time on. Now, that's the talent factories in Southeast Asia. I think this is something that we all need to look at because it is the most interesting aspect when you look at talent in Southeast Asia. Let me just take you through it. So again, I'm using some numbers from Asia Partners, which they shared with us. So they looked at the LinkedIn profiles of all the employees in Southeast Asia and the top 30 tech companies. Now this includes the global tech, like everyone from your Microsoft, Google, Amazon, to all the local unicorns across Southeast Asia. And they found out something very interesting. In the last couple of years, 9,000 people, 9,000 executives have left the top 30 companies, tech companies in Southeast Asia, to pick up leadership roles, CXO level jobs in other companies. I'll just repeat, 9,000 people have left the top 30 tech companies. And in 2022 alone, 1,200 people left the top 30 tech companies in Southeast Asia to become either a founder, a co-founder, or another CXO level job in Southeast Asia. And let me give you some specific numbers. C Group, in the last few years, 528 executives in management level roles have left C Group. And in 2022, it was 155. Lazada has lost 407 executives in management roles. 23 of them left last year. Gojek is 317 and 56 left last year. Tokopedia is 186, 48 of them who left last year. Bukalapak 110 in total, 25 of them left last year. And Traveloka has lost about 147 people and 26 of them, again, all of these management level roles, and they left last year. So what are the implications of this? The implication is that we are finally starting to see the Grab, the GoTo, the Tokopedia, the Traveloka mafias emerge in Southeast Asia. And if you're an investor, what does it mean? It means that at a time when valuations are down, some of the best talent is available or stepping out of the established tech companies to do new ventures. So it's the best time to be in tech in Southeast Asia. The talent factory will see some of the best quality companies emerge in the future in this region. Tough times ahead, but tough times will produce tougher companies. And I think Southeast Asia has got a very exciting future, especially because all the time we talk about the lack of tech talent, but I think we are set to see a very interesting future for Southeast Asia. Okay, I just want to leave some Indonesia-specific numbers with all of you. So Indonesia, in terms of deal volume, Indonesia had 14% more deals last year. The total number of equity funding deals in Indonesia was 253. But in terms of deal value, it dropped 61% to 3.71 billion last year. That is because there was hardly any mega funding rounds, not just in Indonesia, but all of Southeast Asia. And overall, in 2022, Indonesia's homegrown startups accounted for about 22% of the total equity deals in Southeast Asia. Again, I want to quickly touch upon 5 trends that we are looking at for Indonesia in 2023. This was put together by my colleague Angus McIntosh. He's here with us. So when it comes to digital trends in Indonesia, these are the 5 things that we need to look out for. 1, the warung tech scene in Indonesia. If you look at the companies, whether it is Warung Pinta, Lumo, Ula, Buka Warung, Gudang Ada, all of them have undertaken significant number of layoffs to reduce their exposure. Mitra Tokopedia, now it's adjusting its business model because the parent firm, GoTo, is looking at profitability. And guess who has emerged as the biggest player in that space? It's actually Bukalapak's Mitra Bukalapak. So they have emerged as the biggest warung tech player. So that's one trend that in 2023 we'll be actively looking at Indonesia. The second thing is when it comes to buy now, pay later and standalone digital banks, they're going to be facing a lot more competition from mainstream banks. So if you look at BNPL, like Akalaku or Credivo, Atom, we're actually doing pretty well in Southeast Asia, even as BNPL was facing tough times in some of the developed markets. Credivo had to, do away with its, could not go ahead with its PAC last year, but they still managed to get funding from Victory Park Capital, who was a SPAC sponsor. And recently, Akalaku raised about $200 million from MUFC, which shows that global investors are still very bullish on BNPL space in Southeast Asia. But in 2023, one thing that we should be carefully tracking is the level of debt in this space, because these firms actually rely on data to give credit from several different agencies. The other thing that we are, again, when it comes to tracking is the digital banks. So you look at the likes of Bank Jago or Bank Neocommerce, they had a great 2 years, in the sense that between both these banks, they have about 25 million customers. They're even profitable. And you look at the banks that have either stakes or owned by the unicorns, like, for example, C Bank Indonesia, Grab has banked Bank Pharma, and Bank Indonesia is backed by Citigroup and Bukalapak. So these banks have access to pretty large ecosystems. But mainstream banks in the last 12 months, they have not kept quiet. They have been building out their own digital banking and mobile banking capabilities. So I think mainstream banks are going to be like uh, will be intensely competitive. This sector will be intensely competitive in 2023. Two other trends quickly. One is the food delivery offerings. If you noticed, all the food delivery players have launched subscription services. We need to wait and see the rest of the year whether this is sustainable or whether this will sort of enable them to sustain the momentum that they had during the pandemic. E-commerce, yes, the numbers are there. The list in terms of the listed companies, you've seen the C Group numbers, Tokopedia numbers in GoTo. It seems to have lost the momentum, and we are of the view that there will be further slowdown because e-commerce firms will reduce their promotional activities, especially free deliveries. And finally, I wanted to leave you with another interesting point. In terms of the OTT streaming services, video in Indonesia is emerging as a clear leader. And what's interesting here is if you look at all of Southeast Asia and South Asia, video is the only local or regional player that has been able to compete with global majors, not just compete, but do better than the global players. So that's a very interesting aspect when it comes to the Indonesian market. And they're a unicorn. So we don't talk about video in terms of when you look at the unicorns in Indonesia. Yes, okay. So quickly, in terms of what do we have in the agenda? We have a power-packed agenda, like the MC said, we have about 12 sessions. And the DealStreetAsia team has gone all out to ensure that the summit remains different, that it is editorially led, that our content is very strong, and it is built on the foundation of respect for all of you, for your time, for your intelligence, and for your goals. We have 3 policy makers joining us today. Very honored to have 3 ministers with us. The tourism minister's keynote is going to be leveraging the soft power of tourism and creative economy to generate alpha. The deputy health minister will be here later today. He's going to be talking about transforming healthcare in Indonesia through technology and innovation. We have about 7 panels. Some of them are the themes that we're going to be talking about. One is consumer, the other is fintech, and we're going to be hearing from some of the leading VCs on what they think about the funding environment for 2020, the rest of 2023 and beyond. We also have a bunch of founders who are disrupting some of Indonesia's most traditional industries, from construction to fishery to retail. So you're going to be hearing from them on how they've been using tech to disrupt Indonesia's traditional industries. And our opening panel, please don't miss that, because that is interesting, because we are going to be talking about alternate funding options. It includes debt, convertible, non-convertible, the role of angel investors, as well as new terms that are appearing in term sheets today. Structured preferred equity, warrants, secondary financing, anti-dilution clauses, and liquidity preferences, among others. That's going to be an interesting session. We also have a bunch of breakout sessions. Now, these will happen over lunch. They will be at level 2. You can see the details on my screen. And I'm confident that you'll find these very informative. So if you have signed up for these sessions, do remember to go to level 2. Sorry, we are on level 3 now. Do remember to go to level 2 so that you can join these sessions over lunch. Before I wrap up, just want to say thank you to our sponsors. Without them, this event would not have been possible. Our main sponsors, Salt Ventures, USS Networks, HKX, and also communication agencies, Red Hill. They've been associated with all our summits for the last 7 years. Thank you so much for your support over the years. All have sponsors, have played a big role in making the summit possible. Just one more thing before I finish. I would urge all of you to sign up for a free data offering that we have. It's called the DealStreetAsia Deals Barometer. So every month, our reporters produce the Deals Barometer. It gives you an inside track on all the deal activity for the 3 regions we cover, which are Southeast Asia, China, and India. So amidst all of the talk of funding, gloom, and winter, so every month you're going to get in-depth research-backed perspectives on fundraising in some of Asia's most opaque markets. It's, like I said, it's free to read. You get an overview of the deal making in the region, and it's broken down by sectors, investors, and deal stages. Finally, the DealStreetAsia team, more than half of them are here in Jakarta. I think 22 of us are here. So during the networking breaks, do connect with our team. Most of our reporters from Southeast Asia are here, so Give them your feedback on our editorial, on the stories that we do, on the research reports that we produce. Talk to them on the kind of stories that you want to see us doing in the future. Your feedback will be extremely valuable. Our non-editorial team, the commercial team is also here. Please connect with them. You can discuss potential partnerships and other opportunities where we can work together. Yes, so I think, yeah, time to get started. We have a packed agenda. There's an intense day ahead of us. Yes, all sessions have a Q&A element. So make sure you scan the QR code and send your questions to the, the speakers, the panelists who are on stage. And if you haven't subscribed to DealStreetAsia, and if you're not reading us, please visit our booths, pick up a subscription. As subscription media, we would love to have your support. And as I mentioned earlier, our flagship event in Singapore, the dates are already available. It's September 11 to 13. Put it on your calendar, pick up your discounted tickets, and we'd love to see all of you in September. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. We have a packed house. Let's get started. Thank you.